All right, guys, welcome back to the show. If you're just tuning in, this is Chew's Views. I'm Richard Chew. And if you're watching on Facebook Live or any of the other spots to catch us, Professor Kevin Schultz has got his non-ball cap due on this morning. But I can't tease him because we love him and we respect and appreciate what he brings to us every few weeks.
Nice
Well,
pivot, Richard. Nice pivot.
man, if we weren't on the air, I have something else I could say. 'Cause- oh my goodness, good to see you. How you been?
I've been good. I've been good. I mean, I got 6 kids who all started school, including myself. 5 kids and myself all started school on Monday. So it was a big week of transition for us, probably like many of our listeners going on right now. And I got a bunch in college. So I spent the last week ago moving everybody in. And now I'm just sad because my house is so quiet. And I'm happy because my house is so quiet. I got
Right.
these mixed emotions, right?
You go into a room and it's like no sound there. There'd normally be a sound and some rustling of papers and and now you go in that room and it's crickets. But then you go to your favorite chair where you can sit and chill out and you're like, woosah, this is perfect.
But I think I'm gonna miss a lot of the higher prices we're experiencing because I go to the grocery store now and I have to buy for so many fewer people that I'm only spending, a couple $100 when I used to spend a lot more than that. Oh
Well, that
well.
you know how that goes. I know how you were raised. You so that say that reduction now, that don't mean you spend it, you know.
Oh, I'm spending it on
Uh,
tuitions. It's already out the door. It's already out the door.
oh my good. Yeah, I thought about you the other day because, I saw the kids in our neighborhood, making it back to school and all that. And, my wife and I are kind of nerdy in that regard. We want to make sure the kids in our community are safe and that they're crossing at the crosswalk, don't cross in the middle of the street. Don't stand too close to the curb. Buses do turn on a sharp angle, and large vehicles step back.
Hmm.
The things that you want to do and make sure that the kids in the community are safe. So, kudos to you because in many cases you're working with freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, grad students, and all the rest. So you got a big map of age of people. But applauds to you for being back in the mix again and helping us learn some things.
You want to
Wow,
hear a crazy statistic I got, Richard?
talk to me.
All right. I'm a history professor, so I always look at the history of all this stuff. In 1980, so one fun parlor game that us historians like to do is we look at all the quality of life indices, inflation rates, healthcare, life expectancy, and we put Ronald Reagan's face in 1980, and we watch the graph move compared to all the other, major industrialized nations in the world. In 1980, 80% of a public university, 80% of that income that went to that public university came from the state, and 20% was paid in tuition by you and me.
Hmm.
Now, 50 years later, 56 years later, or whatever, no, I'm not,
46.
46 years later, 80% of the revenue that goes to a university comes from tuition, and
Hmm.
only 20% comes from the state. Now, sure, there are some higher costs that go into running a university. Universities have been asked to do more than just educate kids. We got to do mental health stuff. We got to do all sorts of clubs. That's all fine. There's been some mission creep, sure, but there's also been the minimization of the amount of income that comes from the state and from the federal government. And that's why we're paying higher tuition. That's why me, with my 4 kids in college, am strapped in all these high tuition, even for in-state schools. I mean, you go to University of Illinois right now, it's $36,000 if your kid lives on campus. That's insane. That's
Yep.
insane.
Well, Doc, here's the thing to that. You mentioned Reagan. Um, a lot of people know this, others may not. That he essentially destroyed our federal. Uh, I'll use the word route to college by taking because he destroyed what was going on in California. California used to be probably the most affordable of of the top 10 states in the country. Places to go to college, which is
Mhm.
because their California state system was so robust and so well funded. And then Reagan mucked that up. He took that federal, and now look where we are. So y'all should do some research on what Doc just presented about the shift in the revenue. If you really want to have a better peek into why college or certainly one of the main tools as to why college is so expensive right now.
And the other part of it, so I grew up in California. My parents are the product of California state universities. I mean, UCLA, Berkeley, they were the pinnacle of higher education in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. They were public schools. My parents produced their tuition slip showing that they had to pay $25 or something like that a semester, some
Hmm.
ridiculously low amount. It was still some money back in 1967 or whatever, but it wasn't anything like the percentage of income that we have to put up with now. And they were getting high quality
Oh yeah.
education, high quality education. And now one of the things, I made the mistake of bringing my children to their grandparents' house in California, and they looked up and said, "Wait a minute, it's January and it's 72 degrees and we can go to the beach." So I have two of my kids that went back to state schools in California. My mom and dad are excited. Thanksgivings are going to go off this year because they're back to the motherland. But now we're paying out of state tuition. And
Yeah.
California's decided that they're going to jack up prices for out of state tuition just so their in state kids can get more financial aid, which I respect. We
Right.
got to get the money from somewhere.
Yep.
But it is no longer this commitment to universal education. There's no longer this commitment to the notion that we need to have an educated citizenry, and that's going to sort of set the whirlwind in where at my university, UIC, every dollar that gets put into UIC spins out $7 to the greater Chicago and Illinois income, just with creation, job creation, with company creation, with workers that go out there. So these universities are actually revenue generators if you look at the long-term output of them. But that's not what the universities are looking for. And we've had one party in particular that's been pushing back, let's say, against critical thinking skills of the citizenry because they want to continue this narrative that universities, are just bastions of the left and we're able to indoctrinate our students and things like this.
It's heartbreaking, but it takes the fight. It goes back to what Amy said earlier ago, a moment ago about the risk and massive action, and massive energy to shift the things that we want to have. And universities for such a long time, particularly state universities, were known for taking in lots of information, taking in the people that wanted to see change for everyone. And President Barack Obama, former President Obama, was kind of talked about negatively because he said that the real one of the big arcs of change in our country is at the doorstep of Ronald Reagan. I'm paraphrasing, but it's true because so many things that took place during Reagan's term as governor, but also certainly as president, have been they were the seeds for so many of the things that we have now as problems when it comes to education, when it comes to unions, when it comes to wages. And so sometimes we do have to, when we look at history, we do have to stop and go back and say, where did this start? Where did this come from? Because part of the fix, I mean, this gets into the whole thing around how, the best doctors do the best work because they ask you the questions about what you did, what you've been doing to get you to where you have this pain point. And I think that one of the things that the Republicans have been doing very well is to make talking about history a bad thing. But history teaches us so much in the moments of why and how we got here.
Yeah, I mean, Reaganomics is, well, Ronald Reagan's tenure from 1980 to 1988 is generally considered by historians to be the end of what we call the New Deal order. So, starting in the 1930s with the Great Depression with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, all of a sudden there was this tremendous commitment to the commonweal, to providing for the neediest among us, for investing in our social programs, investing in education, investing in the postal service, investing in things like Social Security, which was invented in FDR. Now we have Medicare and Medicaid as sort of the big moments in this creation of this Social Security network. And then it is starting in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan that we see the end of this New Deal order, as a famous historian named Gary Gersel called it. And, it was Reaganomics. It was a three-part program of Reaganomics, which was lower taxes on the rich, cut social services to pay for that, and then ignore budget altogether and increase spending on the military. And that's basically the formula we've been living with from the right for the last 46 years. And so us historians have a lot of debate on whether or not Trump is just the manifestation, sort of the continuation point of those changes wrought by Ronald Reagan, or if he is something new and sui generis. My argument is he's been both. He's sort of been a
Hmm.
continuation of this, but he's not an ideologue. He doesn't care about ideas. He doesn't care about Reaganomics. He cares about corruption, kleptocracy, enriching himself in his own little circle. And so he's using the formula of Reaganomics to destroy a lot of the political norms, things you and I have talked about in the past.
It's interesting, and I was thinking about this in terms of where we are with socialism, and I know it's a big topic. Um, Before we go to the break, let's take a quick stab at it. We may come back to this after the break in terms of that and voting right now. But what would you just define in the most succinct way that you can what socialism is? Because socialism, but well, let me stop there. Go for it. What would you define it as being?
Okay, so I'm a historian, so I'm going to do a quick historical analysis. But there was socialism before there was communism. There was a sense of commitment to the social. And we have that today. We pay for paved roads. We pay for our elementary school kids. We pay for crosswalks. That's part of our taxes, and it goes to enhance the social. Society is enhanced by our taxes. So we currently have socialism, as I'm sure most of the viewers know. Now, then the question becomes is how far do we expand those social programs? Then you get Karl Marx coming along in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, and he's put this big bugaboo of communism out there.
Hmm.
Communism never existed. It doesn't exist. It's in a society that is so socialized that it actually doesn't need a government to function because the social is so committed to enhancing everybody's well-being that there doesn't need to be somebody who's adjudicating how the modes of production get sent out. So there's never been a communist state. That's just been a target that a lot
Hmm.
of socialists, but not every socialist, has had. So socialism can lead to communism, but there are many socialists who don't want socialism to end in communism. There are many socialists, like let's say, even though he resisted the term, well, like FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and all he wanted to do was preserve capitalism, which is a sense of economy that's based on individual growth of wealth, individual freedom to create companies and businesses that will enrich themselves, and then tax those people so that that taxation could expand social programming so that there's a certain floor below which no American citizen would fall between. So we need to have a debate about where that floor lies and what the consensus among the American population. More than 80% of Americans think that we have too much wealth at the top and we need to raise the floor. Now, the use of the name democratic socialism has both been somewhat accurate, but it's also been a gift to Donald Trump because he says, oh, these people are just communism. And we're going to hear more and more about that as the midterms come on. But all socialism is, see, this is what I do. I give you a historical answer and then I define it at the end.
That's why I
Here's
asked.
here's what socialism is. It's just a commitment to the social. It's a commitment by us to expand our gifts and our well-being and our commitment to society at large so that there's not a floor below which the most impoverished, the most needy among us will fall. Now, where that is, we can have a healthy debate. But right now, we already have a commitment to roads, to schools, to certain free healthcare, for taking care of our elderly in the manner of Social Security payments. We do have some social programs, and we need to raise those up, especially as inflation goes up, and especially as more and more of the wealth goes up to the top 1%.
To me, there's a physics visual that we should be using right now, and that is the inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid is eventually going to topple in over on itself because it can't sustain if the bottom doesn't have enough of a base to sustain what's at the top. It's just physics. And I don't mean to oversimplify it in relationship to what and how you just explained that, which means that you and I should be writing a book together about it. But to that end, we have a society that doesn't understand that that is where we really are and that communism is viewed as bad. I think that people should be more concerned about dictatorship rather than communism. So, Doc, let's take a quick break. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Choose Views. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, it's me again hanging out with Professor Kevin Schultz. I refer to him as Doc. That's an affectionate way of me showing him the love and respect that we have for the hard work that he's put in all these years and his just focus on helping us better understand why our history is one of the best tools that we have in terms of how we can move forward. We can't deny our history. We can maybe argue about it, debate about how it is, how it came about, what it means, but it exists. It's not like it doesn't exist. In many ways, if we get rid of our history, it's kind of like getting rid of the foundation of who we are, good, bad, and in the middle. And one of those pieces, Karen Byrne is heading to Washington with some of her friends right now on the anniversary of the Great March, Dr. King's March, and that was about balancing out society, and it certainly was about voting. And right now we are in a dogfight when it comes to mail-in ballots. And give us your take on this right now, Professor.
On mail-in ballots, well, I'd say yesterday was a good day for democracy. I'm surprised to get good news on this after the seesaw that we had for the last week. But yesterday, as you know, what the judge that had been weighing whether or not mail-in ballots could be allowed, the Supreme Court weighed in. It was all over the place, and it took me a long time to sort of piece together what was going on. But essentially, what happened yesterday was that a federal judge said it is too late for us to stop mail-in ballots for the midterms. We need to allow these to move forwards. She had previously supported the Supreme Court, which had supported the U.S. Postal Service's willingness to do this, but nobody had seen the Postal Service's plan. So then the Postal Service's plan was released, and it showed this complete whipsaw back and forth, untenable, complicated, bureaucratic procedure. And then she looked at that yesterday and said, there's no way that this can be able to be enacted. So mail in ballots, at least as of now, will continue to move forward for the midterm elections because they're 2 months away.
Yeah.
So, you know me. I mean, I'm a historian, and I'm following MAGA, and I'm following Trump. And in democracy, you got to take your body blows. But the biggest fear for me has been the destruction of our democracy and what kind of institutional changes are going to happen. And I was worried, and I am still worried about how MAGA will game the midterms. But yesterday, allowing these mail-in ballots will more or less allow the normal elections that we've had. So, of course, as a historian, the history of mail in ballots goes back before the American Revolution. I mean, soldiers that were fighting in the American Revolution who
Mhm.
were far away from home were allowed to have election officials come to the battlegrounds, take their tally of votes, and then bring them back to their then colonies. There wasn't even a United
Mm-mm.
States, right? And in the War of 1812, we had a sort of version of mail in ballots. And this expanded hugely during the American Civil War when soldiers who were far from home, especially in 1864, because Lincoln wanted those military votes. So he made sure there was mail-in ballots so that the soldiers were allowed to have mail-in ballots. And then with the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th and early 20th century, we had a much more mobile society where people were out exploring. They were out trying to generate wealth. They were out in oil rigs. They were all over the place. And we saw this general expansion of mail in ballots. You traditionally needed until the 1970s an excuse. It could, of course, be a military excuse. I'm a soldier fighting overseas, but it could be that I'm far away from home doing whatever business venture. But we have this long, long, long history of mail in ballots. And starting in the 70s and 80s, election reforms and election sort of creative stuff always happens in the West. Women were allowed to vote in the West first. There were all these traditional and it's because the West was wild, so-called wild. It was there were no railroads, there were no paved streets. Things were harder to mobilize, and they wanted more people to vote in order to get statehood. So all of a sudden, you've got all this creative voting rights. So in the 70s, you get states like California, Oregon, Washington, who actually grow mail-in ballots and this grew in the early 2000s to the point where you have about a quarter of America voting by mail-in ballots. Many of the states that have universal mail-in ballots without an excuse are red states. Utah was one of the leading states to have mail-in ballots,
Yep.
right? And you could do a whole election with just mail-in ballots in Utah, or you could take your mail-in ballot and now go and deposit it. So you could have that feeling of voting, even though you were doing that. And so we have this long history. In 2016, there were more than 250 million ballots passed. About 25% of them were mail in ballots. And using the Heritage Foundation's numbers, this right wing foundation's numbers, there was, I looked this up, 0.00006 instances of election fraud. Some of them mail in, most of them not mail in.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, there's this whole narrative that these mail in ballots are going to allow all sorts of fraud to happen. There's no evidence for this at all. But it's become sort of this Trump bugaboo to suggest how this election can be gamed because he sees the writing on the walls. I've said this before. Trump is a really masterful politician. You might hate the guy, you might love the guy, I don't know, but you might hate the guy, but you got to say he's really good at getting elected and he's really good at manipulating politicians and politics. And his polling numbers, wherever he gets them from, are pretty accurate. So you can see that there's writing on the wall. He sees himself losing this midterm election. Hopefully it's the House. It could also be the Senate. We'll see how it all goes, but he's worried. And that's why he's pushing this narrative that we're going to have all sorts of fraud, that mail in ballots are going to be the problem. And he's mostly trying to do this to sow chaos
Yep.
because mail in ballots aren't necessarily a blue state thing. They're not necessarily a red state thing, and then voter ID. I mean, in Massachusetts, 70% of the citizens, this is a reliably blue state, 70% of the citizens have passports, and that's sort of your gold star to vote. In West Virginia, a reliably red state, only 20% of the citizens have passports. So it's not clear exactly how this is going to work politically, other than he wants to sow chaos so that
And
he can
that's
create that narrative.
that's why I have referred to him as this chaos agent because, Rocky and Bullwinkle and Natasha would be, they'd be like, yeah, this is our guy. Because at the end of the day, so I'll expand what you just said about voting in red and blue states by mail. It's a universal thing in so many states. But it's about the depression and the suppression of showing up. They, meaning Trump, the administration, the cabinet, and the broader GOP, are showing signs that they're kind of okay if there's chaos with this election in the midterms because the GOP, the House and Senate folks that are running, they know that their days are numbered too. I mean, if any group of folks in the country have access to a lot of research about politics and about elections, it's those 535 people. So they know what time of day it is. And so I think a lot of the folks on the right who are running are equally aware that their days are numbered. And as a result, they've got to kind of go along with this narrative that there's going to be some shenanigans. And if we can keep this going, then maybe we can catch a break and stall the elections or create something that's going to spread it out a little bit to buy us a little bit more time. That's what this seems to be all about. But the word that is the label is yours and mine is chaos. It's the chaos, the instability. Here's the thing as we wrap up, and I got a question to ask you, then we got to wrap it up. The thing about chaos is the group that's in power is the group that benefits the most from chaos. And right now, the Republicans, they got the levers. So chaos favors them because they then get to determine how we go forward or not. That's what a lot of people have got to understand. The chaos benefits the Republican Party right now. It's really, I don't think there's really any question behind that. That's why they're not getting in the way of some of the garbage that's going on. All right. Go ahead. You got something to say real quick. And then I ask you
I
a
was just
question.
going to say the narrative that the story that I've been telling for the last several months when I've been lucky enough to be on your show is that we've been sort of seeing, a country divided maybe 40, 30, whatever it is. We've been seeing the MAGA coalition sort of spiral out of control and fall apart until you get to this MAGA core, which is maybe 20% of Americans, something like that. But they're sort of continually losing members over one thing or the other. I talked to some MAGA friends of mine, and they are no longer MAGA. I mean, these were people who supported Barack Obama, and then all of a sudden they became Trumpies because Facebook invited them into the chaos, such that it is. And now their thing is the corruption. There's too
Yeah.
much corruption. Like I cannot believe. And I said, that's what it is. Okay, whatever it is, it could be unnecessary wars, it could be inflation, but it's the corruption. Okay, so now they say both parties are just corrupt, so I'm not going to vote. And I said, that's fine. Please, please.
We'll benefit from you not showing up. All right, Doc. Last thing, we got to go.
Yeah.
What has been your favorite music concert that you've ever attended?
Okay, music concert that I've ever attended, special meaning, okay? Because my
Okay.
wife is a huge Adele fan.
Okay.
So when Adele had a residency in Las Vegas, it was right when that ice storm hit Chicago and all the airplanes froze. So she and I went on a planes, trains, and automobile quest to go from Chicago to Las Vegas. We had 48 hours to get there. And I could tell the whole story, but it would take a lot longer than the 1 minute. And we slid into home plate right as the concert was about to happen. We rented a car, we borrowed cars from friends, we got to Las Vegas. And then all of a sudden, to see somebody with that level of talent open her mouth, this working class girl from England, and she opened her mouth, and it was Voice of Angels coming out. It was Marian Anderson. It was
Yeah.
something like that where, oh my God, what am I watching and what am I witnessing right now? And it's my wife's favorite singer. So to see her, my wife, light up in the sort of bask of this amazing talent, that goes down. It was a recent one, so it's particularly special to me. We can
Cool.
go on further if you give me more prep to
No,
think
we
back in
can't.
my family history. But that one was amazing. I got another one in New Orleans where I walked into a
I
random
can't
bar
do that.
and
You're
there's
gonna.
Jimi Hendrix. It's not Jimi Hendrix, it's a look-alike. He even has his Fender guitar turned upside down, and he sounded just like Jimi Hendrix. That was
All
an
right,
amazing
guys, we got to
concert too.
go. Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned to the Stephanie Miller Show.
Thanks, Richard.